When I woke up this morning, I had so many messages and notifications on Twitter from being tagged in things, and I was just like, what's going on? Was there like some huge announcement? Well, not necessarily, but there were some new Fluffle cards revealed. There's actually 5 new ones, and this is really, really exciting because in the past, I've been playing Fluffles a long time. It seems like for the past couple of years, anytime we get a new Fluffle, it's like one random Pendulum monster or one bad fusion monster. So to see a whole bunch of different cards, a couple monster cards, a couple spell and traps, that is really, really exciting to me. So in today's video, we're going to go through the 5 new cards, and I'm going to give you my sort of first impressions on them as a Fluffle player, someone that's been playing the deck for a very, very long time in a lot of different ways. The first card is Fluffle Dolphin, as you guys can probably already see on the screen. This is a level 4 water fairy monster with 1600 attack points and 1000 defense. It has 2 different effects. First, you can target one toy vendor in your graveyard, set it to your field, and if you do, send one Edgem Sabers or one Fluffle monster from your deck to the graveyard. Secondly, if this card is sent to the graveyard as fusion material, you can shuffle one Polymerization spell or one fusion spell from among your banished cards or your graveyard cards into the deck. Both of these effects are hard once per turns, but it looks like, at least right now, that you can use both of them in the same turn, which is great. So what do I think of this card? Well, I think it's really interesting. I think it fits into some really usual play patterns that you're trying to do. For example, let's look at the first effect. So with Toy Vendor, you have a couple different effects that you want to use multiple times in one turn. The on-field effect, the discard a card to draw a card and reveal it, that is a soft once per turn. So if you manage to get rid of it and then put it back on the field with Fluffle Dolphin, you're free to use it a second time. That's really valuable, but what's also really valuable is that every time the Toy Vendor will hit the graveyard, you get to search a Fluffle monster, which will really help facilitate your fusion summons. Overall, I think that first effect is very, very good. As for the second effect, it's neat. It's neat recycling stuff. As far as recycling a banished card that would usually come up when you Fright for Factory, banishing a Fright for Fusion, this part doesn't matter as much, but it is worth mentioning that Fright for Patchwork has to search the Polymerization from your deck specifically if you want to get the search for the Edgemp. So if you manage to go through like all 3 of the Polymerizations, which isn't super unlikely, then this card could shuffle one of them back so you could actually use another copy of Fright for Patchwork, because you need to have both of the search targets available in your deck. To me, this card seems like a one of, which might not sound super great, but in Fluffles, you have a lot of ways to search cards. You have the Toy Vendor, obviously. You have the Fluffle Dog, obviously. So you have a lot of ways to get to all of your Fluffle monsters. So even just playing one copy means you probably have like 6 other copies of the card effectively, because you have so many searching effects. When I read Edgem Scythe for the first time, I honestly thought it was like a fan card, just because this card is insane and it really makes a lot of interesting plays happen in Fluffles. This is an Edgemp, of course. It has 1000 attack. It's level 3, so you can summon it off Tour Guide if you're still playing that for some reason, and it has 2 effects as well. So the first effect, which is just ridiculous here, it says, during your opponent's main phase, as a quick effect, you can reveal this card from your hand, fusion summon one Fright for Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control or have in your hand as materials, including this card. Holy crap, you guys, we can now, as a quick effect, summon Fright for monsters on our opponent's turn. That is insanely powerful. And the reason it's so powerful is because previously you've really struggled going first with Fluffles. They don't have a lot of going first plays. With this card now, though, we actually have a way to interrupt our opponent if we manage to go first, if they make us go first, I should say, because while you can't summon Fright for Tiger off of this card effect, which is a real shame, but keep in mind that Fright for Tiger has Edgem Sabers specifically as the material for the card, you can summon the new fusion monster we're going to look at in a couple minutes, which is just as good in a lot of situations. Let's take a look at the second effect. This says if a Fright for Fusion monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. Once again, keep in mind, it looks like right now, at least with this translation, that you can use both of these effects in one turn. This thing seems like revolutionary for the Fluffle Fright for deck, whatever you want to call it. Having an Edgemp that you can search off so many cards, namely that you can search with Fright for Patchwork, which you also have a lot of access to with Edgemp Chain. You have so many different copies of this card. Very similar to any Fluffle monster, the Edgemps are very easy to search as well. With this card, it actually gives you something really, really meaningful to do on turn 1. Keep in mind that Dolphin is a level 4 water monster, which we had just looked at, so now you could possibly end a field with Bahamut Shark in a totally awesome, and then also have Edgem Scythe in your hand. That's a negate and an interruption with Fluffles, a deck that really isn't known for doing that, or wasn't known for doing that in the past. This card, as well as Dolphin, seem like really worthwhile additions to any Fluffle strategy. But oh man, is this fusion monster even more exciting. So Fright for Cruel Whale is a level 9 fusion fusion, 2600 attack, and 2400 defense. This thing is just as generic as Fright for Kraken. It just takes one Edgent monster plus one Fluffal monster, and it has two pretty valuable effects. The first effect is the main reason you want to summon it on your opponent's turn, and that is if this card is fusion summoned, you can destroy one card on each side of the field. This is really great for a few reasons. When you summon it off the scythe, it's really good because you don't always have like a ton of material for the Fright for Tiger, but more importantly, you can use this card in combination with your other cards like Toy Vendor to get even more value. In my opinion, you would play one copy of Tiger and one copy of Whale. Keep in mind you can only control one copy of Tiger at a time, and especially now that Master Rule 5 is out there, we want to be able to summon a lot of fusion monsters on the field at once. Oftentimes in Fluffals, you get in this awkward situation where you want to summon one Tiger to bait and negate, and then summon a second Tiger to pop the rest of the board. That's not always an option though, because you don't have a way to get the first Tiger off the field. You're kind of stuck not being able to make the second copy. However, if you play Cruel Whale, you can summon this one first, maybe bait out your opponent's negation, and then follow it up with a Tiger to blow up the entire field. Keep in mind that the boosting effect of this card, the second ability, is not a hard once per turn, which means you could theoretically summon this card, boost a fusion monster, make a Sabertooth, revive this card, and then boost another monster. It's really good with cards like Fright for Kraken, which can attack twice, or Fright for Wolf, which can attack a whole bunch of times, and I think this card will definitely be a staple one of, especially now that Fluffals don't have to play as many Link monsters under Master Rule 5. Fright for Repair is the next card. This is the only spell card. It is a normal spell, and keep in mind here that because it is a Fright for card, you are allowed to search it with Agem Chain, so this does have like a bunch of extra copies, even if you only played one of them, which is really nice. We've looked at a lot of cards with two effects so far, where you can use both of them in the same turn. Not the case with Fright for Repair. You're just stuck to only one effect of this card per turn, which I think is pretty fine. The first effect, the first option here, is target one Fright for fusion monster in your graveyard, return it to the extra deck, then you can special summon one Fluffal or Edgent monster from your graveyard. That effect is great. A lot of times you only have room for one of some of the Fright for fusion monsters, so this gives you not only a way to recycle it, but also a way to get a monster on board. I mean, it's just really solid. The second effect says you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon one Fluffal or Edgent monster from your hand. Fluffals, while they might not seem like it at first, oftentimes do get locked into a situation where they have too many normal summons in their hand, especially when you open like Dog and Owl. It can be sometimes tricky to summon both of those and get both of their search effects. One of the cool synergies you might not think of is that you usually want to play Foolish Burial Goods in any sort of Fluffal deck to send that Toy Vendor to the graveyard and get a search. Well, if you already have what you need, but you just want an extra special summon, now you can use that Foolish Burial Goods not only for a Toy Vendor, but also for a Fright for Repair to use that graveyard effect. I feel like in the past, every time we get a new Fright for or Fluffal spell or trap card, a lot of the times they're like really mediocre outside of a few choice ones like Fright for Patchwork and Fright for Fusion, but I feel like in the case of Fright for Repair, it's actually going to be good enough to at least see play as a one of, just because it's so searchable and gives you a little bit extra longevity. Speaking of mediocre Fright for and Fluffal spells and traps, let's take a look at Fright for Vendor, the last card in today's video. This one is kind of weird. I mean, it's not great, but it does some interesting things. First off, this card's name becomes Toy Vendor while it is on the field or in the graveyard. The reason it matters while it's on the field is because you can then send it with Fluffal Wings if you wanted to, although it's kind of slow because it's a trap card. While it's in the graveyard, it matters because you can reset it with the new Fluffal Dolphin. Will either of those things actually make this card good? I mean, probably not, but they're interesting, I guess. Secondly, once per turn, you can discard one card, draw one card, and if you do, reveal it. If it is an Edgent monster, you can destroy one card on the field, otherwise put one card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. So we see this parallel between the Toy Vendor effect, which wants to hit a Fluffal, and the Fright for Vendor effect, which wants to hit an Edgent monster. It's neat. It's sort of like a Blaze Accelerator reload kind of for this strategy. You certainly can set up the top of your deck to have an Edgent monster. Obviously, Edgem Sabers can stack a card, and that's pretty cool, and it's alright, but is this really what they wanted? I mean, we now have more consistent ways to summon Bahamut Shark on turn 1, and Scythe is like the main ending card that we use to disrupt our opponent. Do you really need 3 interruptions in a deck that primarily wants to go second? I'm not really sure. Maybe you would side deck this for going first, but even then I feel like there's better options. Finally, the third effect here though says if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, have its attack until the end of this turn. Once again, pretty underwhelming here. We have so many other ways to either pop our opponent's monsters or send them to the graveyard or boost our own guys by like 2,000 or 3,000 attack. Do we really need a card that can reduce the monster attack to 0? Probably not. Anyway though, besides the Fright for Vendor, I feel like all 4 of the other other cards are actually going to see play in a Fluffal deck. Fluffals are sort of on my to play list whenever we actually get more tournaments, because Master Rule 5 actually does give them a pretty significant boost. I'll see you guys later though. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Goodbye.